Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got an interesting discussion topic to share with you guys. One that was brought up by somebody on Instagram. They messaged me and said, hey, I watched your Holy Trinity of the Knife World video, and it was interesting, and I wonder what you thought the Holy Trinity of the budget knife world is. And I thought to myself, that's a really interesting question. I had never thought about that. I've never, but it is important to think about, I think, or it's fun to think about, because the budget knife world is often considered a completely separate place, right? Because the territory, the price territory is totally different, right? For those of you who don't know, what the heck is he talking about? The Holy Trinity, right? Three very specific knives. Now, a lot of people were quick to point out in that other video, which you can go watch, by the way. It's in my discussion controversy playlist, which is where this will be. A lot of people were like, that's not what Holy Trinity means. In biblical sense, I know that. I know what it means in the biblical sense, right? But when we're talking about the knife world, the Holy Trinity refers to three very specific knives. Not by my definition alone, because a lot of people are like, I think the Holy Trinity are these three knives, or I think that's fine. You can have your own Holy Trinity. But as far as the last decade or beyond, the Holy Trinity of knives, and this is something you can Google and date back to that point, is referring to three very specific knives. This is on blade forums. It's on multiple different knife forums, different collectors groups, right? Those three knives, by the way, follow me on Instagram at metal_complex, and there's a link for my Patreon right down below. It would mean the world to me if you supported me. Those three knives are, of course, the Hinderer XM18, specifically the 3.5 inch, the Strider SNG. Now, I've got the ProTech Strider out here today because I don't own an actual Strider. People are going like, oh my gosh, he just bumped that knife into the Hinderer. I don't care. Both of these are users. And then the third knife, which is going to have to appear as, just an image, is very specifically the Chris Reeve Sebenza, right? There was the Sebenza and the Sebenza, the original Sebenza, the Sebenza 21, right now the Sebenza 31. It's all the same type of thing. This was considered to be the Holy Trinity of knives. They were ultra high-end, still are ultra high-end production knives. They still command an insane amount of attention in the knife world right now, right? Strider was kind of the not super big on fit and finish, right? Remember, this was a long time ago, right? This term came about, like, when we were talking about these knives, it came about like a decade ago. Strider was kind of the hard use, kind of not real big on the fit and finish aspect, but it's kind of the hard use thing. The Chris Reeve was the more elegant sort of precision made luxury item. And then the Hinderer XM18 was kind of a mix of the two. These were all American companies. They were all using similar materials. They were all using the very best materials that were possible at the time. So these three became very specifically, I cannot stress that enough. It's okay to have your own definition of this, but very specifically, this was decided by the knife community that these were the Holy Trinity of knives. They didn't have massive competition back then. They didn't have the same type of competition that they have now. Funny thing is they're super giants now, all of them, right? Chris Reeve knives, Hinderer knives, Strider knives, they sell out really fast. Chris Reeve being the most plentiful at the moment, but yeah, these were the Holy Trinity, right? Now, when I'm thinking about the budget knife world Holy Trinity, right, I want you guys to keep in mind, when I think about this, because a lot of people are going to be like, so this is going to be like the best three budget knives that exist. No, it's not going to be the best three budget knives that exist. Just like the original Holy Trinity between the SNG, the 3.5 inch XM18, and the Sebenza, they're not necessarily the three best knives in the price range. They just represent a very specific time and like this interesting point of the knife world, and the knives that people think of when they thought of that territory, or super giants, for that time period. Again, ironically, they're still super giants, right? So I had to be really careful thinking about what I think the three, it's almost like the most iconic knives in this territory. Let's define budget first. On this channel, a budget knife is anything less than $75 US. A lot of people are going to say, that's not what budget knives are. Budget knives are less than 20. Budget knives are less than define it however you want. On this channel, I have to, for the sake of moving forward in this video, I have to define it a very specific way. under $75 is a budget knife, right? Thinking about the most iconic knives that I can think of that kind of represent the same three separate territories of the official Holy Trinity, and why I think that. I think I've got them here, right? For some people, this will be interesting. For some people, it won't be interesting at all. And for some people, they'll get really, really frustrated and they'll say, why didn't you include this knife? Why didn't you include this knife? Again, please keep in mind, I'm not necessarily selecting or saying that these three are the greatest budget knives of all time. But in terms of being iconic knives that represent, that like everybody is aware of, that represent three pretty different territories, right, in the budget knife world, I think I've got this down. First off, I think this is going to be an obvious one. Perhaps the most iconic budget knife of all time has got to be the Ontario Rat, 1 or 2, right? I mean, this is the 1 in D2 steel. I'm sure many people remember when they made the switch officially from AUS 8 to D2. That set off a firestorm because D2, right, at the time, I remember the Benchmade 710 for $130 to $140, which is still to this day considered one of Benchmade's best designs ever. That knife was flying off the shelves for $140. US made, G10, steel liners, and D2 steel, right? This is how far back we're talking. When the Ontario Rat, which was already considered an amazing knife, when they made the switch from AUS 8 to D2, and they wanted what? Back then, 40 to 45 bucks, they still want roughly that. People pooped their pants. Nowadays, that's not that big of a deal, but this knife still continues to sell. There's so much attention that's still on this knife. This is still a super recommendable knife, right? It's definitely not the best budget knife out there, not by a long shot, but it does work. I've beat on this thing super hard. It's been in my collection for a very long time, right? We're just looking at some nylon scales. We're looking at steel liners, and we're looking at a flat ground D2 blade, right? It's all right. It'll work, right? But it definitely represents that kind of, whether you're talking about the large one or you're talking about the smaller one, right? To me, this is kind of the hinderer of the Holy Trinity, right? It's not classy. It's not super classy, but it's also not like, necessary. It's funny that the Hinder was considered in between. The Strider was considered the more like serious hard use, when in reality, they are both just as capable, right? Again, I know this is a ProTech Strider. I don't have the actual SMG here. Sorry. Compared with the other two knives, which will make a lot more sense here in a second, I think the Rat is not only iconic, it definitely has that. I think a lot of people, would agree that if you're going to create a Holy Trinity, the Rat definitely needs to be in there, right? The iconic thing is covered. But in terms of its place in the Holy Trinity and what it represents, I think it's kind of the hinderer of the group, right? So, you got to remember the way that people were judging the Hinder in the original Holy Trinity was not the 2021 Hinder. They were talking about the 2012 Hinder. Fit and finish back then was a little better than Strider, but it wasn't what Chris Reeve was doing. Nowadays, the Hinder's got equal fit and finish, arguably better fit and finish. I know that's going to make some people mad. Than the Sebenza. I'd say it's on par with the Sebenza. But if we're comparing to the original Holy Trinity, this is kind of like, it's okay fit and finish, right? It's definitely plenty capable. Probably not as capable as one of the knives in this group, and definitely not, quite the, I'm not going to say as nice, but kind of the classiness of the other one. So, I hope that I've given enough definition, enough bulk to my argument there. Again, you guys are all perfectly willing, or I'm sorry, perfectly, it's totally okay for you to be like, no, this doesn't make any sense. This would be my Holy Trinity. That's fine. But the idea here, Holy Trinity, very specifically defined. I'm trying to do my best to put that together, right? It does not mean that it's the top 3 budget knives of all time for this reason or that. Moving on here. The next part of the Holy Trinity. Nobody can argue how iconic this knife is. Nobody. I actually don't like it. I don't like it at all. But I can't deny that it is a good tool. It is an incredible value. When people think budget knife, this is one of the knives that pops into their head immediately. Immediately. Whether you're new to the knife world or you're not new to the knife world. By the way, these will all be linked down below. You can definitely get all these right now. That knife, very specifically, is the Opinel number 8. And I think probably the carbon steel, I mean, it doesn't really matter. This is the inox, the stainless one, right? This is a $17 knife. Now, hear me out. This knife does not have the same corresponding fit and finish in this territory to the Holy Trinity, to like when we're talking about Chris Reeve. What I'm saying is this is kind of the Chris Reeve of the group, not because I think it's got the best fit and finish. The Chris Reeve, the other element of the Chris Reeve Sebenza is the minimalist look, the straightforward, no-nonsense tool look that it has. So if I was going to relate this one to one of the original Holy Trinity knives, this would be the Chris Reeve. This is straightforward. There's nothing that's meant to be. The only flashy element of the Sebenza is the standard one has blue thumb studs and a blue thingy, lanyard thingy on the back, right? That's it. There's no other flashiness there, right? A lot of people can say, oh, the finish on the blade is really nice. The finish on the titanium is really nice. That thing is about as straightforward as it gets. But you know, they sell because they're such amazing tools, right? The Opinel number 8 is a fantastic tool. I spent an afternoon breaking down boxes and doing a bunch of other yard stuff with this knife. Fully flat ground blade, right? You got the ring lock and you got some wood handles. That's about as straightforward as it gets. Is this better than a lot of the stuff that Civivi's coming out with? No, definitely not. In most cases, I would rather spend more money and get a Civivi. Same way with the Rat, right? But it is definitely iconic. There's no way that, I mean, looking back as far as the Opinel has existed, and we're not talking about knives that are famous and have existed for a long time, like this or that. It's not specifically any one thing versus another thing. It's just like in this case, we have such an amazing, iconic knife that people swear by and that people instantly think of, right? It's almost like the top 3 knives that people instantly think of when they think of the budget knife world, kind of, right? But specifically, they still have to be considered good tools in 3 different areas, right? 3 very distinct, different areas. The Opinel and the Rat, the only thing that they have in common is that they both cut. That's it. Everything else is totally, totally different. The funny thing is, in the original Holy Trinity, we had 3 different frame locks, right? But they did represent 3 completely separate territories in that price range, right? None of these knives, except for one, are actually made in the United States. So that is also something that's different from the original Holy Trinity. I don't know that that was specifically part of it. It's just how it ended up being in the original. But yeah, $17. I can't deny that this is a recommendable knife. It'll work, right? It's definitely not my favorite of the bunch. And the funny thing is that of the 3 in the original Holy Trinity, the Chris Reeve Sebenza is actually my least favorite. I still like it. I'd be happy to own one. I'd be proud to own one, but it's my least favorite of the bunch. So, I mean, this is just my opinion. I'm not saying, by the way, that factually this is the Holy Trinity and it cannot be argued. No, you can definitely. Nobody has ever established a budget knife world Holy Trinity. Nobody. I mean, I'm sure it's been talked about in chunks here or there, right? Top 3 videos and this or that. But the original Holy Trinity is established by the collective knife community that's been around for at least the past decade. Yeah, this is not, so yeah, this is anybody can argue this, right? So there we go. We got the Hinder, we got the Chris Reeve. What is the Strider? A lot of people will be disappointed, right? Everybody's going to point out Metal Complex's ability to drag out a video is second to none. Thank you for the insult/compliment, right? I like to talk, but I like to give volume and depth to what I'm saying, right? This is a poor example of that. This is just empty dialogue. The Strider. This is a knife that actually is meant as a gift for a gentleman down the road. So to the gentleman who sent this in, this will absolutely be going to that gentleman, the old man who received my package by mistake and was kind enough to let me in, give everything back. He was super nice. And so one of my viewers, after hearing that story, said, I want you to give this to him. And I will. I wanted to get this video done before I did that because I really, truly believe that this is the final one in the Holy Trinity. And that knife is the Buck 110. Specifically, the version of it that is in 420 HC. Now this knife kind of is its own thing, right? I mean, the Buck 110 is one of the most famous pocket knives to have ever existed. It's still argued to this day. A lot of people, Pete from Cedric Caneda he's got a whole character based on, this thought process, is that we never needed anything more than the Buck 110 in the first place. That the ultimate knife design exists solely in the Buck 110, and anything beyond that is just luxury. Yeah, I've got about 500 uploads that say otherwise. But it's definitely still a good knife. And what they want for it right now, which is about $50, I think is very fair. This definitely represents, what people, were describing back then with the original Holy Trinity as the most capable corner, the one that was the most, sort of hard use driven, I guess. And I'm not sure, again, it's really hard to say why people thought the Strider was more capable than the other three. Maybe because of the ergonomic lines, right? Maybe because of the whole deployment thing. Who knows, right? I don't know why. Maybe the Strider just gave off the tougher vibe, The Strider was the one that walked into the room that had the big forearms and the big neck, right? And they're like, yeah, geez, that guy's been working with his hands, Whatever, right? It's not necessarily that it's truthful or very specifically defined that way. It's just kind of loosely defined as the hard user, right, of the group. The Buck 110 is definitely, I would put my money on, the most capable knife in this group. I'd say the backlock is probably the most dependable of the group, right? Build quality is definitely good. Yeah, this is a great knife. I mean, it doesn't have a pocket clip. You got to open it with two hands, pretty much. Same with the Open L, right? 420HC, the way the Buck does it, I've heard that it's great, right? This knife is iconic by itself. It doesn't really need to be a part of the Holy Trinity, right? But when you think of budget knives, when you think of good budget knives, I would say that there's a huge percentage of people, right? Because again, we're not talking about the 3 best budget knives ever made. I know that there's going to be so many people aggressively ignoring the fact that I said that 3 times. And they're going to go, these are hardly the best. These are hardly the best. Listen, I'm not saying that these are the 3 best. I'm defining these as I can't call them cornerstones because there's 3 of them, right? Cornerstones of a pyramid, I guess. These are the 3, most iconic budget knives that I can think of, right? I know people will say, you missed this, you didn't think about this. I bet you I did. I bet you I just thought that these were better. But the Buck 110 is probably the most famous of this group, right? Of the knives that I laid down. Again, Rat 2, can't pretend that people don't know what that is. That's iconic. The Open L number 8, I hate it, but everybody knows what it is, and it's definitely considered a good knife, just like the Rat 2. Definitely iconic, definitely substantially more iconic. You can't not put it in here. I think we've got 3 completely separate areas here, right? All 3 of them budget knives, all 3 of them iconic, very different in terms of deployment, locking system, right? Yeah. Strider, Hinderer, Reeve. That's kind of what I think here. And I thought about this for a long time, actually. It took me about 4 days to make this video, looking over everything, not only that I've reviewed, but just looking back over lists of some of the most iconic knives and how they're viewed today, right? I think that's definitely a part of it, right? There's definitely knives out there that were really, really iconic. But if you ask the common knife guy today, or the common enthusiast that's definitely a veteran in this knife world, you're like, how is that? Like, do people still buy that today? Is it still considered? And a lot of that stuff, people would go, no, right? Remember, that's definitely an element in the original Holy Trinity. Strider knives, Hinderer knives, and Chris Reeve knives, most people, you ask them, should I buy one? And people go, oh yeah, dude, that's a Strider. Oh yeah, that's a Hinderer for sure. Yeah, dude, that's a Reeve. Definitely, go for it. People still feel that way about this stuff. These are all arguably outdated in a way, but people are generally, including like me, I don't like this one, and I'm not a big fan of the Buck 110. I love the Rat, but it's outdated, right? But when people ask me, like, well, but I mean, would you recommend them? I'm going to say, well, yeah, they're still definitely good knives. They're still fairly competitive, right? There's newer budget brands coming out with arguably better stuff right now, but are they going to leave their stamp on time, right? In this age of the knife world, where they're like these companies are churning out. They've basically got the recipe for a good budget knife down, and they're pumping out 50 new designs every 6 months. Probably not going to leave a stamp like these three here. That's just my opinion, though. I like doing stuff like this. This was one of the most interesting topics that somebody had suggested to me in a really long time. And forgive me to the gentleman whose name I cannot remember from Instagram. I actually did look through my DMs and it must have gotten buried. So make yourself known down in the comment section. I would venture to guess that person, if he's watching, probably watched to the end. Make yourself known and I'll highlight that. But thank you very much. This was a fun topic, an interesting topic. Obviously, it's up for debate. I don't get to define this by myself. Not like the original Holy Trinity, where that's, again, been defined by everybody over the last 10 years or so. But I don't get to decide this by myself. But this is truly what I think. I think these are the three knives that best represent the budget knife world Holy Trinity. That's going to be pretty much it today, guys. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.